Thank you so much for welcoming me in as an outsider who has done very little Elixir. I've learned so much today, and I'm really excited to be here. My name's Libby Horacek. I'm a software developer at Position Development, which is a 5-person software consulting team in Brooklyn. And today, I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on when I was first getting started at Position. I'm going to talk about how we managed to get the product done, some challenges that we ran into and that we've continued to run into working on a legacy Haskell app. And when I'm talking legacy, I'm talking rendering HTML templates, like old school. And I'll talk about some strategies that helped with those challenges. So for some background, when I joined Position Development in 2015, I joined as an apprentice developer, which meant that I did almost all of my developing under the guidance of a mentor, Daniel Patterson. It was my first software development job. I was a career changer. And while I was hired partly because I already knew Haskell, and I'd been working in Haskell on hobbyist projects for like a little over a year at that point. At the time that I joined, it was mostly Ruby that I was doing. And most of the Haskell projects were kind of dormant in maintenance mode. But in 2016, my mentor announced that he was leaving. He gave us plenty of notice, like 6 months notice. But he was leaving to go continue his education. And over the next 6 months, he handed off all of the projects to me. And like I said, most of those were kind of just maintenance projects, but there was one, Jacobin Magazine, that had a big project coming up. So that project was the Jacobin, oh, come on. Sorry, guys. Should have known that this wouldn't work. There we go. Come on. Okay. That was the Jacobin Magazine redesign. And when it was originally built in like 2013, it was a WordPress site that had Haskell, a little Haskell subscription app kind of embedded into it via an iframe. Anybody work with iframes? Woo! They have problems. So what we wanted out of this project was to make the WordPress be primarily for editors and writers. We didn't want readers to have to engage with the WordPress, just to like kind of cut down on some security surface area. Ramike, the creative director, front-end developer, and designer for Jacobin, he wanted the posts and articles to be structured with different types of posts structured in different ways. You know, he wanted the interviews to be structured differently from the roundtables, to be structured differently from listicles. He wanted all the pages on the site, which he was the one who was writing all these templates, to be using the same templating language instead of him having to switch between PHP, UG, and Haskell, which he liked a lot better, actually. And all of this was in the service of making the site more mobile-friendly and responsive. Iframes are not great for that. So this was kind of what we wanted to have. We wanted to have like all the users go to the Haskell app, and the Haskell app is just drawing content from WordPress. And we did that. I put redesign in scare quotes because, like, as you can imagine, that's basically like a complete re-architecture of how this works. Like I said, my mentor left the company. He'd already kind of he decided on this architecture and built some of the tools for it, but he left it to me and my coworker David, who was not a Haskeller, to actually implement the re-architecturing. We worked with a WordPress expert named Pete. She built the REST API integration, and she used this plugin called Events Custom Fields to make the REST API responses have all the information that Ramike wanted. He wanted to have like lots of sections, so each section could be formatted in a different way. He wanted to have whether it was a paywall to be like included, whether having like table of contents or like postscript, like just tons and tons of these like extra fields that wouldn't be in a regular WordPress post. And Daniel had already built this library called Offset. And this is what an offset template looks like. This is pretty much exactly a template from the actual production site. So we have WP post by permalink, which is it looks like an HTML tag, but when it's rendered, what it is doing is making a call out to WordPress, to the WordPress API. Well, actually, first it looks in the Redis cache, and then if the post isn't there, then it falls back to looking in the WordPress API. And it gets a JSON response back. And then this part in here, these tags are all the ones with WP at the beginning are more offset tags that say how to use the JSON that comes back. So this is saying that there's a multi-section. This is a multi-section post. And for each section, you're going to have a title for that section and some content. And that's pretty much how the querying to WordPress works in our app. The way that we allowed them to use the custom fields is Daniel wrote this domain-specific language that let you specify the fields. So this one is saying that we're going to make a tag called multi-section. It's inside the ACF field, and it has all these other fields. So if you look back to the JSON, you can see the mapping between them. And they've got goofy names for this is the only slide with Haskell on it, so just don't worry too much about it. The end result was that we built this site. It works pretty well. It is mobile friendly, and it looks beautiful, and people are constantly saying, wow, you guys built the Jacobin site, it's gorgeous, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I do take credit for making it easy to build. So we did run into a lot of challenges while working on this, and in the, this was like my first project, my first big challenge, but we ran into more in the coming years as well. And at its base was this. It's just like basic inexperience. Like, I've been a programmer from a young age, but I've been working on production web applications for less than a year when Daniel left the project to me. Meanwhile, my coworker David, who is the one other person on this project, he'd done very little Haskell. So he had a lot of experience with web applications, but when it came to like, how do I write this in a functional style, that was like a little bit, I don't know what I'm doing. But when we put our heads together, we could usually figure out a good solution. And when we did, it was amazing. Whenever you come up with something that works in Haskell, you're like, I am a genius, thank you. But because this is web development, that swiftly turns into disaster. Something goes wrong, right? And I call this the genius ohno cycle. I don't think it's exclusive to Haskell or Haskell web development, but it definitely is something that I feel. And let me give you an example. So we ran into this problem where our front-end developer / designer / creative director of the magazine, he was working on this full time, right? He wanted to get this done. Meanwhile, David and I were only working on it part-time. We had other clients. And that meant that P, who was doing the WordPress stuff, and Ramike were both working together, getting all the data on the WordPress side in the right shape, and on the front end, Ramike knew exactly what he wanted to build, but they were stuck waiting for us to write everything in this weird domain-specific language, right, before they could actually use it, which was a huge drag. And David and I felt very stuck. For me, I was like, I've never run into this problem before. I've been making web apps since I was a kid, but I've always been like the sole user and consumer of anything I write. Meanwhile, David has, he's worked with lots of teams, and so he had lots of experience, but he'd never seen anything like this weird templating language that I was using, right? So I put our heads together and had this conversation. And David was like, this templating language is way too strict. It's really weird that we have to like specify what the structure looks like. Why can't I just do like in Rails and just like give access to all the data that they need, and they just pick and choose what they want? And I was like, oh, that's all, I can do that. And David was like, what? How do you do that? Because Haskell can seem at first very inflexible, right? So we wrote this thing that we called WPCustom, and it let Ramike say, I wish I had a slide with an example, but it says like WPCustom, and one of the attributes is endpoint. And then you just give the HTML, the URL to what endpoint you want to hit. And then within it, you can just use any JSON that endpoint gets back, which is probably as it should have been from the beginning. And this was amazing, and Ramike loved it. And he basically finished the project without us interfering at all. And then a couple weeks later, he managed to merge a template that crashed the entire server. He had got so enthusiastic using these things, he decided to write an index of all the taxonomies in the WordPress. So he was like nesting these calls inside of each other so that like one call would use the response from a previous call like 20 times, making like dozens of WordPress API requests. And all of that was being held in memory until it could render the template, which killed everything. But it was kind of an awesome way to kill the server, so I'm cool with it. So like a big challenge has been, we want to stay on this side where we're like learning and being a genius, right? And we want like on the other side, we want to like move on from not knowing what you're doing, moving out of that paralysis of I don't even know where to start, and making the ohnos have as little impact on actual users as possible, right? The second thing that I run into a lot is the notion of Chesterton's fence. Has anybody heard of this notion? I learned about it from the Wikipedia community. It's one of their community guidelines. You should understand why something is the way it currently is before attempting to change it. So in legacy code bases, there's often many things that are very hard to understand, but that you need to change. And a thing about Haskell code base is that they're also hard to understand. And when you get into a legacy Haskell code base, suddenly you can get paralyzed very easily and stuck in that I have no idea what I'm doing feeling. If you do like make a brash move and change something without understanding it, then you can have a really big oh no pretty quickly. So a very big, I would call Chesterton's fence another challenge. Like what is the difference between this is bad and I don't understand this? It's a very thin line. So what were some things that helped? And these things did like we've managed to grow this product from 1 magazine to 7 magazines. So we have been able to make good strides despite all these challenges. And I'm so thrilled that this is the second time I've seen this. I'd say our #1 tool in our toolbox is pair programming. When I can bring my Haskell expertise and David can bring his web development experience, then we can make really good stuff happen. And the next one is test-driven development. I love test-driven development. A lot of people think that tests are somehow less needed when you have Haskell, and the thing is, one, that's not true. Two, test-driven development is especially awesome for getting you out of the I have no idea what I'm doing stage, and it's also good for it almost reverses the cycle. You start with, oh no, my test is failing. Then you move to, I'm a genius, I fixed it. And then you can just think about what's the next, how can I make this code better? How can I refactor it? And then move back into, oh no. And it's all good, you're not breaking anything. So test-driven development is awesome. The third thing, which I've been using a lot more since I started working more on my own and doing a little bit less pairing, is RFCs. A lot of people, I used to be really intimidated by the idea of doing an RFC, because when I thought of RFCs, I thought of HTTP ones or something, where I had to define what must means, or have a lengthy preamble or something. But no, I just write up what I want to do, what's the problem that I'm facing, what are some solutions I'm considering, and then I can kind of source the knowledge of my teammates in a way that is really fun. So I want to offer some advice for companies. I was really thought it was really interesting that y'all have been working on your apps for 2 to 4 years. Eventually, they're going to be legacy apps, right? If everything goes well, right? So if a company can't find somebody who has extensive production web app experience in their particular FP language, what I'm saying is that you can try getting a person with knowledge of functional programming and just pairing them with somebody who has a lot of experience with web development. And if they're good communicators, good things can happen. So finally, I work at Position Development. I have a Twitter. The slides are here. And then Offset and Larcy are the two. Larcy is the templating language, and Offset is the WordPress library. You can learn about them here. They're not really well documented, but they're there. So thank you very much.